Hi everyone, welcome back to SAT 021. In this lesson, we are going to talk about quadratic equations. First, let's see the definition of quadratic equations. If an equation can be rearranged into standard form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the equation is a quadratic equation. And the x here is our variable, and a is the quadratic coefficient. B is the linear coefficient, and C is the constant term. So there are four methods to solve a quadratic equation: factoring, completing the square, using the quadratic formula, and using a calculator. So in this lesson, we are going to talk about factoring. And usually, when the coefficients are integers, we try to use the method of factoring. Scenario number 1. When the quadratic coefficient is 1, so the equation will be x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we have to find two integers so that their product equals our constant term c. And the sum of the two integers should be our linear coefficient, which is the b. Now let's see an example. X squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. So we have to find two integers so that their product equals our constant term, which is negative 12. So we may list some pairs of numbers. We have negative 1 times 12, negative 2 times 6, and there are four more pairs of numbers. Within these pairs of numbers, we have to find one pair of numbers so that their sum equals our linear coefficient, which is 1. So we may add the numbers up. Negative 1 plus 12 equals 11. Negative 2 plus 6 equals 4. And there are four more sums. So we may notice that negative 3 plus 4 equals 1, which is our linear coefficient. So the factor form for this equation is x minus 3 times x plus 4 equals 0. And then we may solve it respectively. X minus 3 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. And x1 equals 3, and x2 equals negative 4. Scenario number 2, when the quadratic coefficient is not 1, and the equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, we still have to find two integers, but their product now equals the product of a and c. And the sum of the two integers is still our linear coefficient, which is the b. And we may also see one example here. 2x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. So now we have to find two integers so that their product equals the product of 2 and negative 6, which is negative 12. So we may still list some pairs of numbers here. Negative 1 times 12, negative 2 times 6, and there are four more pairs. And still, we have to find which pair of numbers so that their sum equals our linear coefficient, which is the 1. So, similar to scenario number 1, the correct pair of numbers is negative 3 and 4. Now we have to rewrite the middle term using negative 3 and 4. So our equation is transformed into 2x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. And then we may apply the method of factoring by grouping. So for the first two terms, we can factor out 1x. And for the last two terms, we may factor out 1, 2. And then we may factor out the 2x minus 3. So the equation becomes to 2x minus 3 times x plus 2 equals 0. And we can also solve it respectively. 2x minus 3 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. So x1 equals 3 over 2, and x2 equals negative 2. And now we've learned how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. And in part 2, we will talk about how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. And see you then.